practice, we practice hard. We take it, we be optimistic, and we gonna win games, bro. All right, 3, 1, 2, 3.
All right, welcome everybody into another episode of Inside the Command Center, where we're trying to get you as close to the action that we can. Today, doing that is the Rooster, Chris Russell from the Team 980. Chris, how are you, buddy?
Hey, Doug, how are you, man? Thanks for having me. What's going on?
Well, just looking forward to what hopefully will be another victory on Sunday. Chris, before we get there, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the Best Buddies Virginia and DC program. It's very important, and I hope you tell everybody just a little bit about it before we get to something less important in football.
No, it's really, I appreciate that very much. So Best Buddies is a great, wonderful group in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, services the area and provides financial support and support in general, friendship, peer mentorship, job placement, activities, events for families, for a lot of teenagers, young adults that are dealing and living life through intellectual disabilities. Most people know that my son has Down syndrome and autism. Some people just go through one or the other. Some have different delays and different issues and different challenges, quite honestly, Doug. And we just try and help them out as much as they can. We have our upcoming gala on November 10th at the Ronald Reagan Building. Tickets are available now. You can always reach out to me via DM on Twitter if I don't see you there, on Facebook. You can email me, russellmania09@gmail.com, or you can go to the Best Buddies website. Just make sure you're going to Northern Virginia and DC, and you can contribute certainly money to my campaign. Tyler and I, my son, are part of the Champion of the Year candidates. It's easy to find there. Just click around. And also you can just, you can buy a table, you can do whatever you want. So I've been so blessed, Santana Moss and London Fletcher and Logan Paulson and Joe Theismann and Brian Mitchell and so many other guys, are participating and contributing unique items and auction items for bid and for donation to the overall cause. So I really appreciate you letting me talk about it, and also anybody that wants to help. Again, plenty of ways that you can do so. I put up all the links all on my social media at WrestleMania621, Chris Russell DC on Instagram, Chris Russell on Facebook, all of that stuff. So I appreciate it, Doug.
No problem. As you know, when we talked before, my nephew has special needs, and so it's something that's very important to me as well. So I love what you guys are doing for that particular.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now we'll talk a little bit of football. Chris, what is this group? Let's look forward a little bit. What does this group got to do? Is there any chance they keep from blowing this thing up when the season's over? I think you, like me, don't think there's a chance they'll do it in season. There's really there's nothing you gain by doing that. But what can they do to keep it from happening after the season?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a possibility if things go horribly sideways, say like they lose this game Sunday against the Giants, come home, lose against the Eagles, lose then on the road against the Patriots and the Seahawks, which is, plausible, right? And then you get maybe spanked and embarrassed on Thanksgiving Day in Dallas, and Josh Harris, who doesn't want to pull the trigger in a proverbial sense, he doesn't want to be like some pariah, but where he's just like, I'm so frustrated. I'm so, they were 2-0 and boy, this is not, not only is it not fun, but it's not competitive. It's not a good look. It's hard to sell tickets. It's hard to get people excited, what have you. I'm going to get a head start and see if Eric Bieniemy is the guy, see if, if Jack Del Rio, that would make fans happy. But if he's the interim head coach, whatever, just to see if I could do something, right? I don't think that will happen. I don't think it will be that bad, but I can't rule it out. That being said, what they have to do, in my opinion, at 3-3, Doug, is you got to win this Sunday because it's a winnable game. It's a game you should win. It's a game the Giants could win. It's a game the Commanders should win based on talent disparity, injuries, all that. I also think what you have to do is you have to be hovering in that playoff race let's just call it mid-December, when this team comes back from the bye, after taking on Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins in early December at FedEx Field, a game that nobody's going to pick them to win.
Right.
When they go there on bye and come back and go to Los Angeles to take on Sean McVay and for now, a rejuvenated, tough, hard to probably easily beat Rams team, and then you finish up with at the Jets, home for Kyle Shanahan, Trent Williams in San Francisco, and then home again for Dallas. Before that 4-game stretch, you've got to be in that TV graphic or whatever graphic you want to use of in the hunt and legitimately in the hunt. Because otherwise, what are we doing? Like 8-1, 7-9-1, 7-10. That's not good enough at all in year 4. Not good enough. That's mediocre, and mediocrity can be accepted for a little while. It cannot be accepted long term.
Well, and then essentially you'd have say they did just well enough that you didn't feel like you had to fire Ron Rivera or that you didn't want to. He's got 1 year left, right? So then you're in that lame duck. Then do you have to give him an extension somehow so that he's not there? Because as you know, sometimes the fans forget a guy with 1 year left is not very entertaining. Like free agents don't want to come to play for a coach that has 1 year left.
Yeah, and coaches don't want to come and coach and improve the coaching staff with 1 year left on a deal too. That happened to Jay Gruden. If you think about it, and Jay actually had more years, but there was so much speculation and rumor, and again the notoriety bad that Dan Snyder had for firing coaches that assistant coaches like Todd Bowles, when he had a chance to come back to the Washington Redskins, chose to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he made the right decision, by the way, because of Jay Gruden, or largely because, of that disposition. So I will say this. Look, we have to operate like Ron is going to be here, because we have to operate, I believe, like this team should be better than 500. And what I mean by better than 500 is if they're 9-8, I don't know if that alone is enough to completely save Rivera, but if they're 9-8 and somehow they squeeze into the playoffs because the NFC is a little bit down as that 7th seed, which is what I predicted them to be at the beginning of the season, 9-8, and winning a tiebreaker or whatever, and squeezing in, Doug, then I find it hard to fire Ron and the staff. Not impossible, but I find it hard. Now, maybe you say, well, we're gonna have to bring in somebody else to help you, from a personnel standpoint. That could certainly and should probably be on the table. But if they're above 500, meaning they're not 8-1 like they were last year and sitting home for the entire playoffs, if they're that or anything less, I can't imagine how Ron and the Marty Party are still here.
Correct. And then also, I think it's interesting for the fans that say, well, get rid of Ron and put in Bieniemy. Let's see what Bieniemy's got, right? To that I say, and I'm curious your thoughts, if you really like Bieniemy, then the idea of giving him the intern job is not some grand gesture, because one, he hasn't been an offensive coordinator fully in that way before now. He certainly hasn't been a head coach before. So now you're going to add on more to his plate. And Chris, maybe you can tell me, I've been racking my brain, when's the last time an interim coach kept the head coaching gig? So feels like you'd be doing a disservice to EB by putting him in midseason for a job that I don't think ever actually comes to fruition.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly that time. I would have to look that up. I'm sure it's happened sometime in the last couple of years that I'm not remembering. But to your point, like last year, Jeff Saturday. Now that was a weird situation in Indianapolis. There's been other situations across the board. What happened in Denver, obviously, when
Steve Wilkes in Carolina didn't get to keep that job.
Right. Steve Wilkes did not.
A couple times I think he was interim, never got to keep the job.
You're right. But what happened? What happened in Denver, where what's his name? That's the Jets offensive coordinator. I'm trying to remember his name.
The one now
That's
where he got the job and just lost it after 1 year.
right, but the guy that replaced him, Jerry Rosberg, I think it was,
Okay,
he didn't keep the job. Obviously, they were trying to swing a big stick. So I mean, you are absolutely right that I don't want to say it's a graveyard, but it's not what it maybe once used to be viewed as, especially when you have new ownership groups like they had in Denver, like we have here in Washington, where you want to swing your own stick, where you want to swing a big stick, where you want to make a stamp on the franchise in your own writing, in your own mind, in your own being. And that's what I assume Josh Harris is going to want to do. Remember, I mean, like, just to and here's one other thing to point out. Even if they make the playoffs, say they're 9-8, say they're 9-8, and they make the playoffs and they get blasted in the first round by whoever, right? Doug, I don't know if that's a guarantee for Ron to keep his job, because look at what happened in Philadelphia in the NBA with Josh Harris as the owner. He fired Doc Rivers, and all they did was make the playoffs in the second round every year. Now, they blew a 3-1 series lead to a team that they probably should have beat. But I mean, he fired him immediately. Like, and again, that's a different sport, different situation. I'm not saying that it would be exactly apples to apples, oranges to oranges. But I mean, again, when you look at all these things, I don't know if, again, Ron would be completely safe. I don't know if EB would be completely safe. Now, here's the one thing that EB's got going for him, right? The offense does appear to have some signs of life, of course. But, and I don't know if you agree, disagree, what have you, I said Sam Howell is the number one reason why this offense is better. And he also very well could be the number one thing that's holding them back.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers, I have them here. If you extrapolate the numbers out for what they are right now, you're looking at 4,250 passing yards, a 24-16 touchdown to interception ratio. And that includes the game where he had 4 and just short of 300 yards rushing.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that, like a 1.5 to 1, that would be what, a 1.5 to 1 touchdown to turnover ratio, 24-16, which is what exactly I was looking for coming into this year. And I thought maybe around 4,000 yards if he played all 17 games, somewhere in that range. So maybe he's a little bit over that. But the one number you didn't talk about there was the sacks. And where do we land that? Is it 70? Is it 75? Like, I think it's going to get better as the season wears on. I do, unless the offensive line, which has received a lot of criticism and hasn't quite honestly been as bad, I think, as most people think it is. And I think all the analytics and numbers and stats and people that watch every snap and all that stuff, PFF, as much as it's better than most fans think it is. So let's just use that, both pass rush wise, especially, or pass block wise, and maybe to a lesser degree run block wise. What I do worry about is what happens if some of these guys, especially if Leno goes out. I know, like, Cornelius Lucas was awesome last week. That was one game, against a team that had trouble getting home until last week. And he was great. But when you have to play Lucas every game, or what happens if you have to play Chris Paul instead of Sadiq Charles, or what happens if you have to play Ricky Stromberg instead of Sam Cosmi at right guard, because Sam Cosmi gets hurt, who's had a history of getting hurt in his first 2 years. Or I could draw up any scenario you want. So then I wonder, do the sacks continue to go up at this meteoric pace, or can Sam, with experience, more reps, more dropbacks, and again, they're throwing or dropping back at least by call 2-1. I mean, overrunning by design. Like, again, if you include passing attempts, sacks, and design called pass plays that turn into scrambles, they're 2-1. If the numbers go down per game or overall, or if they're not as bad, then we're all going to look and say, okay, this offense under EB, it improved by 4 or 5 points per game on average. And yeah, they really struggled with the sacks early on, but man, did they make progress as they went along. Then I think everybody's going to still be in on EB, and I think fans are going to want EB to get that opportunity.
Are you a fan? I mean, people are disappointed with the ratio from EB, but honestly, in the new NFL, there are just as many people now that are throwing the ball to set up the run. Forever we ran the ball to get everybody closer to the line of scrimmage, and then we take our big shots downfield. More and more, the new NFL is this kind of EB approach where it's like, no, we're going to get our runs out of the screen game and the short crossers, and we're going to throw the ball. And then when you finally back up on us in the zones and the box is light, then we'll start running the ball on you with guys that run angry like Brian Robinson. Are you a fan of that? Because I think that's what we're looking at. This is not by accident. This is what he's into, and a lot of the NFL is into this.
Yeah, and that's largely the game in 2023. Right. What I'm not into is a 2-to-1 disparity. So I'll label it.
He's definitely throwing him into the fire.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And maybe that's partly by design, right? Hey, man, we've got to find out whether this kid can get better at the things that are holding him back. And I thought about this maybe about a week and a half ago, Doug, and I've mentioned this a couple of times. I wonder if this was, not only was this the issue in terms of him getting drafted until the 5th round, but I wonder if this was the issue last year and why they were so hesitant to even play him at the beginning of the week of the Dallas game, which meant absolutely nothing. And there was no reason why, and they leaked to Logan Paulson, hey, this kid isn't ready. Remember all that? And then he played, and then a week later, Ron Rivera's leaking to his media buddy down in Charlotte that he's the number 1 guy. And so none of that made sense, but what does make sense is maybe even in practice. Remember, he was the backup quarterback when Wentz goes out after the Chicago game for about 7 or 8 weeks until late in the year. He's taken backup reps, not just working scout team reps for Taylor Heineke. Maybe they're like, wait a second, this kid doesn't process. He didn't get rid of the ball quick enough. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. So maybe that was what was holding them back in their minds last year. And now again this year. But this year, because they committed to him, they're trying to have him work his way through it. I would say this. I would like a little bit more in the run game. I don't want a 2-to-1 disparity. A lot of people made fun of Ron and Martin Mayhew when they said a 2-to-1 run to pass ratio after the Dallas game last year. People scoffed at that. Well, if you would have told me that Eric Bieniemy would come in here with Sam Howell as his quarterback and that they would be 2-to-1 pass through the first 6 games of the season, I would have gone, ha, 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 ha. And instead, here we are. And again, it's been successful at times. And it has, and it's been a failure at times. So I guess the only philosophy is to keep trying to punch your way out of it instead of giving up and, again, trying to lessen the load and just really seeing, what this guy's got and what you can do with him, because he's got all the physical requisite skills that you're looking for. He's got the arm, he's got the mobility, he's got the frame, he's got the toughness, he's got the work ethic, he's got the maturity. He just he doesn't have 2 things. One, the ability to process and read everything as quickly as you need to at this level on a consistent basis, and he doesn't have the requisite or the ideal height so that he can work more under center and see over those 6'4", 6'5" defensive linemen.
Nick Ackridge, who covers the Commanders for PFF, did a really good article on this today. This is a Howe problem all the way back to North Carolina. So how much of it gets fixed, I think, will be interesting to see. We do a film breakdown every Tuesday here on the podcast, and I can say it's been fascinating to watch those guys break it down, him and Mark Bullock, just to see how many of those are open, clean pockets with targets available. And I think he's trying to hit too many home runs. And if we can get him to start slapping more doubles and singles, I think that will help him significantly. I think that's all part of the mix. I mean, listen, again, the analytics tell you something. They don't tell you everything, but for instance, PFF and, Ackridge is a part of that. I'm sure I haven't read the piece yet. I want to get to it, but they had 14 of the 34 sacks against offensive linemen, running back, and tight ends. Meaning only 14 of the 34 did they charge to the 6 really offensive linemen, including Lucas for 1 game. The 4 others, Leno Jr. had 1, Cosme had 1, Antonio Gibson had 1, Nick Gates 4, Sadiq Charles 2, Andrew Wiley 4, Logan Thomas
won. So really only 12 out of the 34 to the offensive line.
Yes.
So obviously that means that they're charging Sam Howell with 20 other sacks, right? Or 20 of the 34 sacks. So whether that's right or not, whether that's, I mean, again, we can have a reasonable disagreement. But what we can't have a reasonable disagreement is what you mentioned. He's missing guys. Remember in week 1 against Arizona, he missed De'Ami Brown flying down the sidelines, wide open, missed him, turned him down for a first down, and Jahan Dotson across the middle on, I think it was 3rd and 9, but he missed De'Ami Brown. What? He's missed other guys. I remember on a 2-point conversion against, I think it was the Bears. Maybe it was the Bears game. Maybe it was I think it was the Bears game. 2-point conversion attempt. Everybody was mad that he missed Antonio Gibson on a little sit down over kind of past the linebackers, but he missed Antonio Gibson running wide open along the goal line. So, I mean, there's things he is not seeing. And you could go through every game and probably every quarterback and say, yeah, you know what? He missed 1 or 2 things here. Could have done this, could have done that. Again, this is all part of the process. But to your point, and to everyone else's point, until that gets better, until the processing speed gets better, until the confidence, and he's confident, don't get me wrong, he's not like running scared, until the confidence gets better, and ultimately along with that maybe comes some more of the turnovers. Now, I know he had the bad day against Arizona, the bad day against Buffalo, but outside of that, he's been really good at taking care of the football, and especially on the road. So we might have to live with a little bit more of the turnover game as his confidence, as his speed, as his everything starts to develop and again, get quicker. Remember, Doug, you'll remember this. In 2012, when Kirk Cousins came here and everybody was like, oh my God, how could you draft another quarterback? Kyle and Mike Shanahan knew. Okay? I'll just say that. In 2014, when Kirk Cousins started playing regularly, the knock against him was he turns the ball over too much. Interceptions. Well, what did he do as he then morphed into the starter in 2015? His speed, his processing, his ability to read defenses, get rid of the football, all stayed the same. But what he was able to do was get rid of or cut down on the interceptions. As the reps went along, as he got more comfortable, as he got more used to the game speed and everything that comes along with being a quarterback in the NFL, things got better. And I see the same plight with Sam Howell. I think his sack numbers and his ability to process will get better, but maybe his turnover-worthy throws or turnover or interceptions will go slightly higher. But as long as they don't go dramatically higher, I think the juice will be worth the squeeze, if that makes sense.
It does. It's been interesting. One of the things that I have liked a lot of things about what EB has done with the offense. One of the things that frustrates me a little bit is they'll get to rolling down the field, they'll hit for a big shot, and then they'll run up and throw it again. And almost always it is a bad thing for Hal. I think I'd like for after the big play, let everybody get there and slow down for a little bit. Run a play. Even if it doesn't work, it slows everything down a little bit, slows him down just a little bit. But really, that's been one of my only complaints. Where would you grade EB at this point in the season?
So for me, I would say a B minus. Maybe I could live with a B. It's certainly not an A, in my opinion, or an A minus or a B plus. Again, I'm more of I would like to run the ball a little bit more. Again, I don't have to have it be 55-45 or 50-50 or any of the other things that everybody accuses me of on Twitter or X or on the radio or whatever. I do not, let me be clear. I do, and I say this all the time, I do not need it to be 50-50 or 55-45 or anything like that. I am fine with 60-40 if you want to go 62-38, 63-37, whatever. Okay, and I understand the pure percentage ratio things don't always indicate what was called, and game situations should dictate certain things and whatever. That being said, like a game like this Sunday against the Giants, where the Giants are allowing over 5.1 yards per game on the rush, or yards per play on the rush, and way over the league average in terms of yards per game on the rush. I do want to see more than a 2-to-1 pass to run ratio. I do. And I don't want that run ratio to get leveled out or equal just because you have a lead in the first half. I want to see it more incorporated early, unless you're having such tremendous success with the passing game, with the quick game, that the offense is operating with flow and stability. What I mean by that is not only scoring points, but converting on third downs, not taking sacks, not having penalty-a-palooza, knocking back screens and, whatever. I just want to see an offense that fully makes sense to me, because I don't know if I've seen enough of that for my liking. And here's another thing that I want to see. I said this going into last week in Atlanta, they didn't do it. Doug, I want to see them come out and run tempo by design. Not every series, just one series, first series, second series, whatever. Not 2-minute or 3-minute or 4-minute related in terms of the clock. I want to see you on the second series of the game come out and say, you know what? Before you get fully your engine oil or your oil running through the engine, boom, we're going to hit you with boom, 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 boom. And that can be run and pass. And that can be quick game. That can be anything. Or, you know what, come out and, they run jet sweeps. Run a flea flicker like the Atlanta Falcons did on their first series. Now, it didn't work, but it's worth the shot to loosen things up, to loosen that box up, and then maybe you can get to it with your run game, or little sit-down routes, or little choice routes to the tight ends or the running backs or what have you. To me, there's been a lot of things that have made sense, but then there's been some things that haven't made sense. And that's where I'm at.
You had London on the show today. What did he have to say about the linebacking group?
So he was very encouraged, not only by Jamin Davis, as I think everybody was, but also by Cody Barton, who had his best game undeniably, and by Khaleke Hudson, who was a big part of that 2-point stop, along with Jonathan Allen. But specific to Jamin Davis, like we talked about, and I asked him, I said, it looked like it was man across the board, and the other three defensive backs had their guy locked down. There was nowhere else to go, and clearly the first read was to Bijan. And Jamin Davis knew that, knew they were in man, knew it was 3rd and 1, knew that there was a tendency, again, from film study and from earlier in the game, where they went to Bijan on the other side of the field on a similar go route like that, and where they were playing man, and they got intercepted by Kendall Fuller, and then there was the 4th down stop to Cam Curl, which was more from the slot area. But Jamin Davis knew that in all likelihood, it was going to be, sorry, my son is calling as we speak. I apologize about that. That it was all good. It was likely going to be either a double move or a go route, or a quick slant or inside move, maybe a post to Bijan Robinson. So he's anticipating that with the coverage, with the call, man across the board, 3rd and 1, and he jumps it. And, what I love about that is, and I asked London, I said, is that just because of what you see during the game, or is that what you studied all week? And he said, really, it's a combination of both. You're developing more tendencies as the game goes along, but you're still relying on what you saw during the week in all your film study. And I thought Jamin played it tremendously. Again, Barton mentioned London thought he played his best game. The other thing that was interesting that he said, Doug, and I'll just mention this about the secondary. I asked him basically, does he think that the game had passed Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio by, which is a common complaint. I do not believe it has. I believe that's a convenient thing. I believe they struggle between aggressiveness and execution and finding the right pattern, the right rhythm, and the right fit. London said, look, he's like, I do not think the game has passed either one of them by. Again, he's a team employee, but, it's London Fletcher. It's not Tiddlywinks here. Okay, so we got to give him his due. He's Super Bowl champion, 4-time Pro Bowler. And then the other interesting thing he said was on the back end, he felt the scheme and the coverages on the back end were really hard to figure out from his perspective. Meaning when he watches film, he's having trouble as a quarterback of the defense, middle linebacker for his entire career, a nearly Hall of Fame career, he's having trouble figuring out, okay, wait, this, like, what are they doing here? Are they being too predictable? Are they too bland? And he's saying, no, they're not. They're complex and they're complicated. And he didn't say it, but he certainly implicated it or insinuated it, which was, it was more execution error than scheme and design error, which is what I felt all along.
Do you sense, and I've asked around about this a bit, so I'd be curious your opinion, is it taking John Allen and Chase Young, and John Allen in particular, a little bit of extra time figuring out how to do it together? Chase has been fantastic, and he deserves credit for that. And I'm not suggesting that Chase is being fantastic because he's taking it away from John. I'm not doing that. But I think it's fair to say John Allen is not having the typical John Allen year that we're used to. Do you think that has anything to do with it, or maybe John's not right?
Well, I think it's possible that John's plantar fasciitis is still maybe potentially squawking on him a little bit. Not bad enough to keep him out, right, but maybe not 100%, right? Remember, that was a thing late in camp, late in the preseason, but he's not missing, practice time for the most part. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that it's bad, but, I mean, maybe late in the game it starts squawking on him a little bit, right? The other thing that I do wonder about is with Chase, and I think this is undeniable, Chase has taken more of a inside route to the quarterback more often than the circuitous outside route than when we last saw him healthy, meaning pre-injury in 2021. I think because of that, maybe that's affecting somehow, some way how the two work together. And that maybe just still be a feel thing. Remember, Chase missed the season opener, so he's only played in 5 games, and maybe they're still, after a year and a half on the shelf, or a year and change on the shelf, and then again, Chase being more targeting the inside shoulder, the right shoulder of the left tackle, more than he has in the past. And I'm not saying he does that on every snap, but it's clear that he does, that maybe John from that right defensive tackle position, that 3 technique type of position, maybe they are struggling to find that chemistry and rhythm. I've been told that, and I haven't really directly asked anybody that, so I need to, but that's my sense. That's my gut feel, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but that's what I sense could be causing some of the issues.
Who gets more sacks on Sunday, the Giants or the Commanders? It's been weeks since anybody said Commanders either. By
yeah, I think it'll be like an ALCS 6-5 type of affair. I think the 5-4 Commanders. I think the Commanders get 5 sacks because Evan Neal stinks, even if he plays, which I think he'll ultimately play at right tackle. They lost Shane Lemieux to a torn bicep or whatever, and obviously Andrew Thomas and somebody else.
And Schmitz at center is out.
Yeah, right. John Michael Schmitz, right? Exactly. So I know they brought in Justin Pugh. I know off the streets and whatever that whole deal was. And I got it that the Commanders' pass rush has at times been disappointing. And honestly, at times, Doug, you know this, right? They took over part of the Arizona game. They took over part of the Denver game. They didn't take over any part of the Buffalo game. Made a couple of series against Philadelphia, but not enough for my liking. None of the Chicago game. Some, but mostly run blanketing against Atlanta. I want to see a defensive unit that doesn't have to blitz a lot. Remember, they blitzed on 2 of their 3 interceptions last week. I want to see a defensive unit that doesn't have to blitz a lot, that doesn't have to rely on anything more than a 4-man rush for the most part. And I want to see them get home, and I want to see them constantly tear up this Giant offensive line. And what is likely to be Tyrod Taylor, although as we speak, I guess Daniel Jones is still questionable, even though he hasn't been cleared for contact. I think that, I can't walk away from this game feeling, man, I didn't hear Daron Payne's name a lot, or I didn't see Daron Payne, or Montez Sweat, or Chase Young. And I didn't think either. I didn't think any of those guys had a standout game last Sunday. They were all pretty good against the run, and that was their focus. But I need a little bit more. I need a little bit more than just being good against the run.
You think we'll see a lot more of that 5-man front again this week? The Cinco everybody likes?
I think so, but I also wonder, by showing that as much as they have, right, and certainly did against Atlanta, yep, do the Giants go into this game thinking, oh, they're going to come out in that 5-man front and we can take advantage, by going up top or in the quick game to try and get around that. And maybe they have to back out of it a little bit, because I don't know, like, if you look at Saquon Barkley, I mean, obviously he has had, some games running the football against this Commanders or by any other named defense, but I don't know if I would look at him as a guy that's going to carry the ball 20 times in this game and run for 120 yards, unless he has a big run, which he's more than capable of. I don't know if he's that type of back at this point or any point. I think he's more, hey, man, we can get this guy out into space on wheel routes, on sit-down routes, on option routes, and that's how they're going to use him. And if you're going to use him that way, and especially if they hit that early, because you're maybe trying to load up to stop the run and make them more one-dimensional, which, again, is a sound game plan, at least in my mind, then you're going to have to back out of some of that Cinco and maybe try and, again, attack it a different way. And the one thing that I do worry about in a game like this is, if Commanders fans see a lot of Montez Sweat and or Chase Young out in coverage, and especially if they get beat by, they are going to have a conniption. They're going to have a meltdown. But sometimes you got to do that to give a different look or to change some things up. I don't want it on a regular basis, but sometimes that's going to happen, and especially against a team that is going to be looking to get rid of the football quickly and going to be looking to exploit, again, that short passing game or the quick game, and especially to Saquon Barkley.
All right, Chris, they're 2.5-point favorites on the road. I'm curious your thoughts on why the line. I understand you get the 3 on the road. That puts you at 2.5, but it feels like the line should be a little bigger. What do you think about the line, and what do you actually think that the score looks like on Sunday? Yeah,
I mean, I picked them to cover meaning the Commanders to cover the 2.5. I understand why it's not bigger, though, and I don't think it should be bigger. A, they're not trustworthy enough. B, they're not explosive and consistent enough, meaning the Commanders. And C, I think, when you look at the Giants, right, and you look at 1-5, I think that's a little misleading. I mean, of course, Dallas just ambushed them. But against San Francisco, they were in that game, Doug, on the road on a short week for the entire first half. Yeah. They played horrible against Arizona in the first half, but then they had the second half comeback. They were in that game every single snap, including the bad one at the end of the first half, in which they blew against Buffalo on Sunday night. I truly believe the Giants are better than 1-5. I don't know if they're better than 2-4, but I believe they're better than 1-5. And I also believe that they match up fairly well by scheme and design with the Commanders. Now, what I don't know is, again, how much the Commanders are going to be able to eat on defense and with that pass rush. And are they going to be able to simultaneously stop the run, get the pass rush, and also not get bludgeoned on those screens and the quick game stuff that we were talking about, where you allow a 3 or 4 yard pass, to Darren Waller out of the slot, turn into a 40-yard gain, or, again, a screen or whatever to Saquon Barkley that should go for 4 or 5 yards, turn into a 35-yard gain or something like that. So again, I know I'm talking in circles here. I feel okay picking the Commanders in a tight one, 3-4 point game. I don't feel much better than that, and I'm even nervous about the 3 or the 4 points, if I'm being honest.
You like Tyrod better than you do Daniel Jones?
I actually think this is a worse. I think this is a worse matchup this week for the Commanders if Tyrod's the quarterback than it would be Daniel Jones, even though Daniel Jones has had a ton of success against the Commanders. 5-1-1, 70% completion rate, run for 6.25 a carry, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, all of that. I get it sounds crazy, but here's why. I don't know if you agree. I would have liked maybe going against Tyrod if this was his first start. But now that he's got the oil running through the engine of last Sunday night, and again, they were a hair away from upsetting Buffalo on the road. And even though he didn't put up big, impressive numbers in that game, I thought he played reasonably well, despite the mental brain fart at the end of the first half, where if he plays reasonably well, as I think he did on last Sunday, I think he's going to have success against this Commanders defense. The Commanders are going to give up yards. We know that. We've seen that. The question is whether they can, again, get home and whether they can force some takeaways. Last week they were able to. This week might be a different story. I actually think they would benefit from taking on Daniel Jones because I think right now Daniel Jones is a little bit of a deer in the headlights, and he's not healthy, number one. And I think maybe that could throw him out of rhythm.
I don't think he's ever going to play again.
Really?
Yeah.
Daniel Jones?
Yeah, they showed
Really?
Somebody showed the X-ray like a couple days ago. It sounds like, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to put it out there like that, but it sounds like he may be in line for another neck fusion. He just had one 3 years ago. So you notice they allowed him to go out there and throw the ball around, but he has not been cleared.
Right, he's not cleared for contact.
I've heard he's got to get another neck fusion.
I mean, listen, certainly I'm not saying no to that. I guess it would surprise me a little bit that even though he was not cleared for contact, that he would be able to throw the ball a little bit because you're putting, some sort of strain, some sort of torque on that area. But again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a physician. And, look, they can always be wrong. They wouldn't be the first medical doctors in the NFL, as we know, from plenty of experience around here, to be wrong. That being said, I fully expect Tyrod Taylor to be the quarterback on Sunday.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's as mobile as he maybe once used to be. And certainly as Daniel Jones can be, and as Justin Fields was, as Jalen Hurts was, Desmond Ridder really wasn't. Kind of. But, I think this might be a better way to kind of target that pass rush because he's not as mobile as he once used to be.
I like them in this game, like 24-13. I actually think they ought to be able to put on. If they can't put it on this team, then I just don't know which teams they're going to put it on. And maybe they're not a team that's going to be putting it on anybody. But
yeah, I don't think they are.
If they can win this one, they've got a shot to win 3 or 4 of the next 5 and get on a roll. And this is about the time, right? They usually get on a roll.
Yeah, this is. Now normally they're not 3-3, which they're 1-5, 2-4 under Ron in the 3 years through 6 games. So maybe the same thing won't happen. Again, if they lose this game, I'm disappointed. Yeah. If they get ambushed in this game, I'm furious. If they're 3-4, I'm not like, oh my God, the world is caving. But if they're 4-3, and even if they lose to Philadelphia at home, say a tight competitive one, I'm okay with 4-4 through 8. I know most fans might not be. I know that's accepting mediocrity, but I think instead of accepting mediocrity, I think it's accepting reality, which is this team is not built to be a dominant force. This team is not built to hang a 30 burger on anybody, even though they have, they've scored, 30 points in 2 out of their, and 2 out of their 6 games, Philadelphia and Denver. They're just not built that way. So, and with the teams coming up, again, Philadelphia next week, New England on the road, Seattle on the road, Dallas on Thanksgiving, the Giants in between right before Thanksgiving. I mean, maybe you say that's their only legitimate chance here at FedEx, but FedEx has been a house of horrors, not only this year where they've gotten annihilated twice, but through the years. Even though the crowd has definitely changed, it's still been a house of horrors for this entire organization. So I can't even look and say, oh, because they're going to be home the Sunday before Thanksgiving and they're going to be playing the Giants, they're going to light up and put up a 40 spot. What indication do we have that they would do that?
They've got to do it this week. If they do it this week, then we'll feel better about them doing it going forward.
That's fair.
Chris, I appreciate you, buddy. Always appreciate the time. This was great.
You got it, Doug. Great to be with you. I appreciate the Best Buddy support. And if anybody can, support, of course, we take a financial donation. If you got anything that we can put up for auction, just get a hold of me. Again, Chris Russell DC on Instagram, Russellmania621 on DM or on Twitter. If I don't see it, just keep harassing me. We'll get you the proper links. And it's out there, of course, on social media. Best Buddies is a great organization. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Ed.